Good deal. All right. Well, good evening, everybody. It is a pleasure to come together for the Cumberland County Finance Committee meeting on today, Wednesday, October 20th at 5:33 officially. Want to start with a few just welcome and introductions. First, welcome for everybody here tonight who will be presenting. I do appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to be able to do that. Just quick introductions for the committee, if the Finance Committee can, plus Jim and Alex as well, if you will, after. But the Finance Committee, if you could just say your name and what community you are serving in.
Sure, I'm Paul Turog, and I am a selectman in Bridgeton.
And I'm Jocelyn Layton, and I'm a city councilor for District 1 in South Portland.
Jim, go ahead.
Jim Gailey, County Manager, otherwise known as Travis Kennedy tonight.
Alex Kimball, Deputy Manager of Finance and Admin.
I'm Dustin Ward. I'm also Select Board member out in New Gloucester and chair for tonight's committee. Now that we do have recognized quorum, which is good, I can sort of proceed through some of the other business items. First, we'll start with public comment. Jim, Alex, was any public comment received?
I just checked and we have not received any.
Sounds good. All right. With that being said, we'll sort of close public comment and move on to any amendments in the agenda. Committee members, you've gotten your updated agenda as of 10 p.m. of October 20th. There was an addition that was made. It's number 2F, the Cross Insurance Arena. That's the only amendment that has come in before this meeting. So committee members, are there any other adjustments you have to the agenda? All right. Hearing none, I think we're good to go with the agenda that we have as of 10 a.m. this morning. First thing we'll do is just order of business, approval of the minutes. Did committee members, did you get a chance to review those minutes? Have you been able to look at them? Do they look good? Any edits, comments that you have? All right. Seeing as there are no comments or edits, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes from our October 13th meeting at 5:30 last week.
So moved.
Jocelyn has moved. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
Paul will second. Any discussion? Seeing none, we'll do a roll call vote. Jocelyn?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. So moved. Motion carries. 3-0. 2 abstaining, as we are missing 2. But approval of the minutes, all set. All right. Thing I wanted to do before we dive in, I just want to, in case there are any new folks out in what is known as TV land, for anybody who's doing virtual select boards and other things. For those watching tonight, I just want to explain what we're doing here and what our next framework for our time together. One of the things that the committee members wanted to have done is to hear from a number of the different department heads throughout the budget that we are working on. And so we've invited them here tonight to be able to sort of talk to us about their department visions, goals, and give us a 30,000-foot view. And in doing that, we're hoping to really hear kind of your plans, if you have challenges, things that have been going well. And always consider the question that is sort of the backdrop for all this is, if you had more money, what would you do with it? So it helps us sort of understand, well, where would you place it and where are you going? As the agenda has note, we'll go with that agenda. Jim, I know you had made a rearrangement. You're good with this arrangement, starting with IT and going through? Yeah. All right. So what we'll do is we'll dive in. We have 2 members that are not here, but will be joining us. Lee Pratt, who's from the town of Gorham, and then Ball Vale out of the town of Cumberland. And so I wanted to let department heads know that 2 other members will be joining later, but that they aren't able to be here right this second. So with that, I'd like to invite information technology to begin and just again present. Provide us just some background, and then our committee members will ask questions once you're finished.
And I'll introduce Aaron Gilpatrick, the Director for Information Technology for the county, Aaron's been with us for probably just over 15 years, if not more. So a lot of history behind him, and he does a phenomenal job keeping us all connected and with the best hardware and software available. So I'll stop singing Aaron's praises and let him have the mic and let him kick off his presentation. It's all yours, Aaron.
Thank you, Jim. Hello, committee members. I am the IT director. I actually started with the county in 2001, so this is my 20th year here. Obviously, I didn't start as the director 20 years ago, but here I am. The IT department is made up of 4 staff members plus the director, so 5 employees altogether. We service all county departments, provide technical services and support for all county users. So that's roughly 500 users, roughly 400 or so computers. Interestingly enough, I was doing inventory earlier today. We have more laptops in use throughout the county than we do desktops for the first time ever. So the COVID years have really changed the way that each department works, and as such, how IT has to support and manage those computers. So we're kind of moving more towards cloud-based management tools, ways to remote to those computers, regardless of whether or not they're inside our building or not.
Excellent. Committee members, Aaron, I don't want to cut you off. I didn't know if there's anything more you wanted to add there.
From a 30,000-foot view, I'm not really sure what else you folks would like to know. Willing to answer any questions. I mean, from a nuts and bolts perspective, we have all our hardware is on basically a 5-year rotation. So every year we rotate out X number of computers. We manage the IT for the sheriff's office, the jail, DA, try to provide support and services for all those departments. And as they have questions about new technology, how to use it, we try to be there as a resource and to guide them for the best use.
Excellent. Committee members, then I'll offer it up to you. Are there any questions that you have for Aaron at this time? Anything that you'd like to ask him, things you want explained?
I have a pretty general, I'm sorry, I cut you off. A pretty general question on just how much of your resource goes to GIS? Because that's something I know, the towns, particularly Bridgeton, but other towns as well, has been sort of coming on as a tool that we can all use. I was just curious.
Sure. Yeah, the county IT department has had a person doing GIS work for a number of years now, actually, basically to manage data for E911 and geobasing of the sheriff's office CAD calls. So we've had somebody in-house doing that kind of work for a number of years. More recently, we've started doing some GIS work to help support the county regional assessing program. And more recently, we've started doing some mapping and GIS work for some of the towns that contract with our regional GIS program or department. So we're kind of growing into it, providing more services, and we're always looking to see what other needs are out there that we might be able to help the towns with.
Oh, thank you for that question. Jocelyn, go ahead. I know you had a question.
Thank you very much, Dustin. I was wondering, and I'm probably going to ask everybody this, just because I am curious, under your training, education, and seminars, other than IT training, is there any other training that you have for your department?
That line has funded some kind of cybersecurity awareness training that we have done for the county employees more recently. It's also provided training and education for certain classes for certain technology that we're going to be implementing. We've used that to buy online education courses that really anyone in any county employee could go on and use. So it kind of does a variety of things.
Yeah, the cybersecurity is very important. I need to have a training for my staff on that pretty soon. I'm wondering if your training includes anything that has to do with diversity and inclusion work, equity work, anti-racism work. Is that some kind of training that y'all are looking at for your department?
It's not something that we've been looking at for the IT staff department, no. That the line really has been geared more towards the nuts and bolts of, software A and how to manage that software and how to secure the software.
Great, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Excellent. Aaron, Paul, did you want to say something? I just saw your thing light up.
Well, I was just gonna ask another question,
Please go.
and maybe it's more for Jim, which is kind of like I see one of the areas that's supported is the assessing department. And I know we charge, some towns use the services of the county and they get charged back. Do you have a specific, when you're determining the charge back, do you have a specific item for the IT resource that they're using?
We do, and those towns that utilize our GIS services, they have a specific charge over and above what they pay for assessing. So the contract is really broken out into two different areas. One's assessing services, one's GIS mapping services.
Thanks.
Committee members, any other questions that you have? All right, well, Aaron, I appreciate your time with us. This is actually really helpful. Thank you for the 30,000-foot view and appreciate it.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
All right,
Thanks, Aaron.
moving on down the list. Jim, did you have something?
No, I'm good.
Okay. Next, I want to call up facilities. If you could give us your 30,000 view. And Jim, please introduce these folks because I have no names or anything. So it's good to know names and any superlatives you have for them.
Sure. Next up is Bill Trufant. Bill is our new facilities director. Bill has started, I believe, in March, if I'm right. And he's really hit the ground running. A wealth of knowledge and a good catch and a valuable asset to the county staff that we brought on. So I'd like to introduce Bill and allow him to take over the mic. It's all yours, Bill.
All right, thanks, Jim. All right. So yeah, I did start in March. Really new to the county as a whole. We manage roughly a little over 420,000 square feet of usable space for employees, county residents and such, over 7 buildings. It basically also includes the management of our fleet division, which is over 140 vehicles that is shared between the county employees along with the sheriff's department. Our main goals is basically to provide a safe, comfortable, and manageable space for employees and visitors while minimizing the disruption to the daily duties and activities that usually happen when we have to do larger or even smaller projects. Our priorities are to maintain any downtime to any services that we provide to the county and workspaces to the employees. A lot of challenges we have is basically, as any town or any building in Maine, is that our infrastructure is aging, and to try to catch that ahead of time is problematic due to, the money has to go elsewhere to maintain these basic services. Cost of parts and labor nowadays due to COVID, that's a big issue for us. And I would say, since it was asked before if we had additional money, I would say start really looking at the infrastructure of these buildings and how can we start addressing these problems before they become even larger problems and more costly down the line. That's pretty much it. Like I said, I'm rather new, but you have any questions, I will be more than willing to give it my best shot. That's for sure.
Good deal. Well, I think we will actually. So, but committee members, questions for Bill? Yeah, Paul. Sorry, Paul.
Since you're rather new, and I presume your background is in this field, maybe you can just give us your opinion of what you stepped into in terms of, in terms of the structures and the things that you're maintaining. Better than you're used to, worse than you're used to?
It's Maine, so a lot of this stuff is older. So to keep up with a 1965 steam boiler that is basically at the courthouse is not the best case scenario. But again, the older buildings in Portland, and the majority of them that haven't been updated, have that type of infrastructure in place. So I would say about the same. It's what you would expect in any small city, large city, any county. I mean, it's basically as a whole what I would have expected. I would say it's a little more fragmented, I would say, as far as each building has its own set of smaller contracts. For instance, buying custodial supplies for the LEC may be on a different contract than what we would use for the courthouse, which I'm in the process of trying to migrate into one larger contract, better price points, such like that. Trying to take that, at that 30,000 foot view and do it with all of it. Start at the stuff that we know we need to use, custodial supplies. Let's wrap that into one contract and then go from there. But to answer your question, I would say it's about the same, to be honest, sir.
Other committee members, questions? Jocelyn, go ahead.
Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Bill, for your presentation. Does this include the facilities garage operation as well?
Yeah, that's the separate budget line, or the separate budget altogether.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm just wondering, and again, this is like just across the board, but I will ask you first. And just thinking about training and that kind of stuff as well. But is there anything in your budget that has to do with recruiting, retention, and supporting minorities on your staff?
I would say that's more of an HR budget line, to be honest with you. Most of our training, and like you had asked Aaron before, a lot has to do with safety, because we use a lot of heavy equipment, lifts, things that are OSHA safety required that we have to meet every 2 to 3 years, those certain federal requirements. As far as diversity and that type of training, I do know that recently we have worked with, I believe it's Catholic Charities of Maine, with a couple interpreters to help us. We have a French-speaking employee that it helps that language barrier. So we're looking to branch out and to create a more of a welcoming environment that, I'm not about to push away anybody that's looking to work, and I'm ready to take them with open arms, to be honest with you. So yes, we are looking for that, but I believe that's under the HR budget line, to be honest with you.
That's great. Thank you, Bill. That's
Yep.
all the questions I have.
The questions I have for you, Bill. First off, I know there was a line I have it as 5205, special projects. What specifically are those special projects, or maybe you're still in discussions of what those might be? But yeah, if you could just highlight for me, what are the special projects or maybe projects you're looking into?
A lot of these projects are lighting efficiency upgrades. A lot of our lighting that we have is T12 and some T8s. I really want to take advantage of the efficiency Maine dollars that are out there, so we can start, reducing our energy footprint. It's, how it is. It's these buildings, when the lights are on, they cost us money. So if we can reduce the money for the infrastructure altogether, I'm all about it. It creates less downtime. Our electricians don't have to constantly go change bulbs, ballasts, etc. We're good for, say, a 5 year. Once we put the new lights in 5 years, we're not going back.
Yeah. Follow up to that question then, because now that you're mentioning infrastructure and it's aging, have you have any vision of doing what would be called deferred maintenance, or assessing the amount that it would take to upgrade these, or did your predecessor ever do that? And what is that number? I'm curious, what is that number that it would take to really upgrade these the things you're looking at?
To be honest with you, they did. The previous director did do some assessments, primarily at the parking garage. We're in the process of updating that right now. We're doing a conditional assessment with the plan of a 10-year capital improvement plan, so we can start forecasting these needed repairs that will need to be done. At this point, I'm thinking next spring we start looking at all of the county buildings as a whole, and working with a firm to really give us an assessment of where are we going to be in at 2030, what needs to be done before then. So for planning purposes of what additional dollars we need, where we need to bond it or whatever, we have that intrinsic knowledge to move forward and plan. Obviously catastrophic failures happen all the time, but if we know that something's happening in 3 to 5 years, we have that all ready to go.
Gotcha. Yeah. Absolutely. Community members, any other questions?
I actually have one more question.
Awesome. Please go ahead.
Thank you very much. You mentioned something about, COVID has changed everything in so many ways. And also just how much supplies are transferred, how much is in demand, how much not available, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just wondering if you feel confident with your budget, or if you're nervous that maybe there's going to be things that are going to be more just because of that supply and demand. So I just wanted to know your thoughts on that.
I think as far as for COVID, when it comes to cleaning, I think we're going to be fine. I think if we start having larger breakdowns in the mechanical, when it has to do with air handlers, boilers, anything electrical right now, we're talking, if it's a large ticket item, 18 to 20 week backlog. So not having, knowing that ahead of time, we've kind of said cross our fingers and hope that doesn't happen, because we're in the same boat as everybody else. I mean, there could be 4 or 5 people that have the same thing happen. It's not necessarily going to happen that way, but 18 to 22 weeks or 20 weeks is a long time to try to get a repair.
Great. Thank you.
Yep.
I'd like to
Alex.
tack on to that a little bit too,
Yeah,
to what
please
Justin
do.
was saying. We're in an interesting time right now where it's been basically since 2019, since we had decent data of what kind of expenses. In particular, facilities also manages a lot of the repair lines at the jail as well. So there's a lot of these, painting, electrical, plumbing lines. And during 20 and through a lot of 21, those expenses were down because a lot of these buildings weren't getting as much use. Not so much the jail, but those other areas. Now we're starting to head back into this period where the places are starting to get closer to full usage. We don't know what the prices are going to be. Typically, these are lines where I can look at them and say, and I know because this line has done the same thing 5 years in a row, and it varies, very little. It'll be interesting as we go into 2022 to really see what happens when we get closer to a true reopening. So it's it's one of those areas for me that is just interesting to keep an eye on.
Yeah, you can almost feel that there's a tension every week because you're just not sure. And so, yeah, we'll just have to keep our eye on it and hope for the best.
If I could add just one thing, if
yeah,
I could,
please. Yeah.
We're fortunate that my predecessor actually did a great job of negotiating energy costs. So we're locked in on our electrical and our fuel consumption right now for another 2.5 years, I believe. So unfortunately, in 2 years, when we start negotiating that next rate, that's where we might start seeing, those costs start to creep up. I mean, luckily now with knowing what fuel and electrical costs are, we're kind of locked in, which is one of those budget lines that we need to keep an eye on. But yeah, we're locked in. That's not moving. So
Yeah. You said you're locked in for the next 2 to 3 years?
yeah, I think we're like 2.5 years out, to be honest with you. Yeah, I
Yeah.
think it was a 5-year contract.
Gotcha. All right, excellent. Any other questions? And I will recognize Lee is another committee member. He is here. So Lee, it's good to see you. Thanks. But any other questions? And Lee, I know you're just jumping in, but if you have questions, feel free to jump in. But anything else? All right, I think we're good. Bill, appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you for your time tonight.
No problem.
Thanks, Bill.
We'll go ahead and bring up the district attorney for that department.
Good evening, everybody.
Thank you. For introduction purposes, I'll just let Jonathan talk quickly here, but I just want to introduce Jonathan Sarbach, the county's district attorney. Jonathan oversees an office of 20 ADAs and about 34 county support staff. Tonight, he's joined with him with Tammy Getchell. Tammy is a longstanding employee for the district attorney's office and knows the ins and outs and plays a valuable role for the county in her day-to-day work with the district attorney's office. So I'll stop talking there and kick it off to Jonathan.
Great. Well, thank you for having me. I figure I just would open it up to questions unless people want to know a little bit more about what the requests are and everything.
Yeah, we're dying to know. So go ahead, give us a little bit. What does it look like? What's that 30,000 review? What are you kind of envisioning? Maybe some challenges that you're experiencing.
Yeah, no, I know challenges are sort of what we've been dealing with for the last 18 months or so, but I know everybody has, and it's just been a tough time. When the pandemic hit, the court system was deemed essential, including my office, and it was challenging because with the option to work from home was open to some of my employees, but not all of my employees. We have sort of looked at that model and seen what we could do and if there's any options that we have. And we have been starting to move to what we're calling a less paper system. I think realistically, we will never be a completely paperless office due to the fact that sometimes things need signatures. And until the court is going to be open to accepting electronic signatures, we're going to be having that challenge. But at the same time, what we're trying to do is move from a system that is based on files, paper files, into our computer database, which is called Justware, which we're transitioning to a new system called Attorney Manager, which is through the Odyssey system, which is going to match up with what is going on with the court system itself. So that's sort of what Tammy's been helping out with a lot. For creating that system at a state level that's going to match up with the court system itself. The court system is, I think, making a $16 million change statewide to a paperless system. We came under that budget by quite a bit from a state level, but at the same time, we want to match up with what they're doing. So that's sort of what we see on the day to day. Now the challenges as well, and this is something that is what I've been seeing, and I think all of us see as a community, is what can we do to get less cases coming through the door? What can we do to see less people coming into the criminal justice system? So that's steps that we're actually taking from sort of a more trying to divert more cases from coming into the court and hopefully going down to the jail, because I'm sure you all are aware a lot of the county money goes into the Cumberland County Jail for good reason. But at the same time, what we're trying to do is work on more prevention, work on more diversion. And one of the big things that I think you'll see in my budget line that I'm asking for an increase in is our restorative justice program. Restorative justice is something that I've known about for many years as a prosecutor, but when I became the DA, I really had an opportunity to look into how it could be practically put into place. And I've been working with a person named Fred Van Loo, who works with the Portland Center for Restorative Justice. He's actually a former prosecutor from Iowa that started his program back in the 90s. He's written books on the subject and really knows his way around how to better address the harm and also the accountability And at the same time, really recognizing how victims feel about their involvement in the criminal justice system after they've gone through the restorative justice program. So the pandemic actually gave us a really great opportunity because of the backlog and the court shutting down. It gave us a great opportunity to explore what we could do with a diversion system in which cases actually didn't get into court. Yes, we got the summonses from law enforcement, but what we were able to do is, instead of that person coming into court and us creating a case file, basically they would participate in a restorative justice dialogue. And then once they went through that, we got notice that they finished the restorative justice dialogue, and the case got dismissed, or the case didn't even go forward. We just completely just basically said, you're done. You've satisfied what we were asking you to do. And we've been working with the Restorative Justice Institute of Maine on a young adult diversion program, which is age 18 to 25, with the hope that these younger individuals will have an opportunity to work with RJIM, and they will then complete that restorative justice program. And again, we won't see them come back into the system. We've done about 275 cases at this point, I believe all of which have resulted in a dismissal. So that means that there's 275 people that don't have their cases go forward, but something meaningful being done with the actual program. We haven't done an in-depth analysis from a recidivism level. At the same time, though, I think there's only been 2 or 3 cases in which we've actually seen people return. So that's promising. And I can't say whether or not that person would have returned if they had gone into the system. Obviously, we wouldn't be able to predict that. But what my hope is with the increase in that budget is that we'll be able to expand on what cases are seeing or we're utilizing restorative justice. I've talked with my ADAs, and we have something that's called a deferred disposition. Deferred disposition is when a person admits guilt, pleads guilty to whatever the offense is, and then they go on a contract, and there's conditions that they have to maintain during a sort of a quote unquote probationary period, in which once they're done with that, then that case will be dismissed at the end, or they'll plead down to a lower charge. We're going to add in restorative justice as one of the conditions, with the hope that that person really sort of understands that the harm that they could have done to a community or victim as part of that deferred disposition. So my hope is to expand on what we can do with that program. The other programs that we've been doing is, Jocelyn, I apologize if I'm going to step on your toes here, but I figured the question's going to come. So I figured I'd answer it now with regards to training. We obviously, as attorneys, my staff or my prosecutors require what's called continuing legal education. Every attorney in the state of Maine has to do training when it comes to legal practices during the year. It's about 10 to 12 hours of CLEs, and then an hour or one of those hours actually includes ethical training. What we have been doing is when it comes to race, inclusion, and equity is, in 2019, I had a prosecutor, a district attorney named Jarvis Parsons, who's actually a Maine law graduate, come up and give an implicit bias training. Jarvis was a graduate from Maine law, and I believe it was the year 2000. And he actually is from the South. And when he went to a job fair or a law school fair in Texas, he saw a person at the Maine law table, and he asked about what's the diversity at Maine law. And they said, well, Jarvis, that's where you come in. And so he came to Maine law, and he was one of 2 Black students who graduated, but he did an internship at the Cumberland County DA's office. And from that internship, he decided that he wanted to become a prosecutor. And here he is many years later, and he's the district attorney down in Brazos County, Texas. But I did this training in 2019 where Jarvis presented on implicit bias, and it was really geared towards understanding as prosecutors, because of our role in the criminal justice system, because of the power and authority that we have, we can do harm. And if we don't understand the implicit bias that all of us have, then we are in a position where we could be doing harm to individuals that goes against exactly what we're trying to do, and that's act in the interest of justice. And then so in 2000, that was in 2019 that we did that. In 2020, I organized a training through Mindbridge, which is an organization in Maine. We did 6 different trainings through MindBridge, and it wasn't just Cumberland County. I actually brought in the other DAs who were very interested in doing this training as well through the state. And we did these 6 sessions, which really geared in towards implicit bias, but not just that, adverse childhood experiences, anti-racism, really trying to understand how it works within our system, and how important it is to understand that. That training has continued in 2021. We did a 3-part series. The first session was with a woman named Dee Clark, who runs an organization called Survivor Speaks. She's a survivor of human trafficking. She talked to us about her experience, her lived experience with human trafficking. And just by sort of chance, she really started getting into adverse childhood experiences. And then we continued with 2 different sessions, one with the United Way and another with the Resilience Network of Maine, doing more training on adverse childhood experiences. And for people who don't know what adverse childhood experiences are, that is a scale where basically somebody looks at sustained trauma that an individual has gone through when they were growing up, and looking at the correlation between the criminal justice system and adverse childhood experiences. It's a scale of 1 to 10. About 70% of people who are involved in the criminal justice system have a score of 4 or higher on that scale. So if we really can go into those root causes and really talk about what people have gone through, then we're, to me, understanding that from a prosecutor's perspective to try to deal with people who are in the system right now, but then also working on whether or not we can work more on prevention, with the idea that if we can take care, or if we can handle that now as a community, that's going to be less people that are going to come into the criminal justice system overall. Now, we're not going to see those results in 1 or 2 or 3 years. This is a generational thing that we won't probably see results for 15, 20 years. At the same time, though, it's worth it, because it's from perspective of a humane practice, but also from a perspective, if we can get less people going into jail, more people going into treatment, more people going through those root causes, then I think that would be a better way to sort of go about what we do as prosecutors and as law enforcement. And then the last thing I'll just say, Dustin, with regards to that 30,000 view, we are having a continued problem with probably about 80% of our cases dealing with substance use disorder and mental health issues. If we had more resources, more places to send people, we would have a better result than sort of this quote unquote revolving door that we see so much of people coming back into the criminal justice system. We've expanded a treatment court. We have a drug treatment court in Cumberland County and a veterans treatment court, which are really sort of no budget line to that. I do the work with my office, along with a woman named Stephanie Gilbert, who is our diversion coordinator. She and I represent the prosecutors, but we work with defense counsel. We work with the court itself, and then along with Maine Pretrial Services and the probation department. We all work as a team to try to get those people who are high risk, high need, when it comes to substance use disorder or mental health issue, the treatment that they really need, with the hope that we won't see them again come into the criminal justice system. So that's sort of that long-term goal, to get people into recovery, because we know if you're in recovery, there's a good chance that you're not going to be involved with the criminal justice system.
Thank you. Well, you've been busy, which is good, and so I appreciate that. Absolutely. I didn't want to, Tammy, I wanted to bring you in as well. You said that there was, sorry, Jonathan, you said there was someone else that works with you. Is that Tammy? Is that you as well?
Yes, I'm the business coordinator for Jonathan's office.
Yeah, Dustin, to put it lightly, Tammy just doesn't work with us. Tammy runs the show when it comes to what we do on an everyday basis, with budgets and putting these things together. So I don't. She's toning it down a little bit more than she should. So.
Well, okay, that's good. So, and as we ask questions, either one of you, please feel free to speak. But I'll open up for the committee to ask any questions then to either individual.
Jonathan, you did well. They are speechless.
Yeah, I have a couple.
I don't know if that's a good thing, but
Jocelyn, go ahead. I saw your hand.
Thank you, Dustin. Less of a question and more of just a comment, because you answered the question that I sent in via email last week anyway, and I just went over that. And also, that was my top question, is what that restorative justice line what that funding would go towards. And it sounds like you've got a really robust goals and things that you're moving forward with. And as someone in recovery for 17 years, those things work, and they keep people, they help people like me. So I really am very appreciative of it. And just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Oh, that's great. Thank you, Jocelyn. One thing I forgot to mention, I'm glad you brought that up. One of the reasons that I do have a budget line in my office is because I don't want the restorative justice program to cost anything to any person who's taking or that's getting involved in it. I don't want to see a situation where someone's priced out of participating in restorative justice. I don't think that that's fair. So that's why I asked, and I was very grateful to the county commissioners for having that as part of our budget line, because I just think it's that important to make sure that everybody has access to it. It's not just something that some people can afford or indigent defendants cannot afford. I don't think that that's how anybody should be doing business on that front.
Mhm.
One thing I also forgot to mention too, when I was talking about the whole less paper system, I don't know if this is part of what you all see, but there is a capital request that I've been putting in that is basically looking for new types of computer systems, scanners, printers that will be more along the lines of working with this new paperless or less paper system that we have going forward. So like I said, I'm not sure if that's part of your consideration or might be down the road, but that's sort of the idea behind it, to match up with what the court's doing and changing sort of how we proceed with the tools that we have.
Excellent. Any other questions from the committee members? Just a couple of quick follow up, Jonathan. So when you're thinking about expanding some of that restorative justice work, do you envision having or needing more staff or more people to be able to expand that, or are you expanding more of the way in which you impact with the staff you already have?
I think I'll knock on wood. I'll be okay with the staff that I have. We have been tasking more people with sort of, or expanding on what different roles people have. And luckily, I have a great staff. I can't say that enough, that people who are really open to the idea of working on this type of new programs and new ideas. So I don't think that I will need any more staff. I was very lucky from all of you that you gave me a new victim witness advocate last year, which is helpful for our human trafficking cases, along with our domestic violence cases. So that was a great add to what we do. And then also with this idea of the less paper system, with not needing to deal with actually paper files and having it all really in a computer database, our hope is that we're going to actually alleviate a little bit from the staff when it comes to pulling actual files and getting those lists ready for court. But at the same time, asking people to do more when it comes to these other programs. I think there should hopefully be a balance in which we're not asking the staff to do too much because we're taking it away in other areas.
Good point. Okay, excellent. Community members, any last questions? Any other thoughts, comments? Looks good. Well, Jonathan,
Right.
Tammy, thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and very great presentation. And thank you for sort of shedding light on what you all are doing. I hope it continues, and we're looking forward to seeing the sort of the results of all of that work you've been putting in. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you for your time, everyone.
All right, we'll move forward with bringing up the sheriff's office.
Thank you. Committee, I'd like to introduce Sheriff Joyce. Sheriff Joyce is in his third term as sheriff, correct? Did I guess right, Sheriff? He's in the middle of the third term as sheriff. Much like the district attorney, the sheriff in Cumberland County is an elected position by the voters. And the sheriff oversees the jail, the sheriff's office patrol, the civil division, the detectives, which we call CID, and sheriff's administration. So as you may remember, last time there was quite a number of budget line items under the sheriff's purview. So I will stop there. Oh, and I noticed that Naldo Gagnon is joining us this evening. Naldo is the chief deputy under the sheriff, and I will pass the mic over to Sheriff Joyce.
All right, try that. Sorry. Thank you, Jim. And thanks for the invitation to come in and talk about the budget. I did a PowerPoint presentation that is going to probably push Jim to the max on his IT prowess, but hey, there we go. So really, page 2 is kind of what Jim Gailey mentioned, was that the budgets are really divided into 4 different areas. Administration, law enforcement, corrections, and civil process. For this particular budget cycle, we're really talking about civil process, law enforcement, administration. The corrections budget is always done starting in July. So that's on a fiscal year. Everything else is on a calendar year. One of the things I'm often asked is, what does the law enforcement, what do we get for our taxes for law enforcement? So I put a map out that basically talks about what we do for Cumberland County. First of all, we have deputies that are general revenue deputies. These are deputies that are paid through the county taxes. And I call them, for ease, it's considered basic cable. Everybody pays into it. Everybody gets the use out of it. Then we have towns that want enhanced services. We call those contract towns. And that's the HBO of basic cable. You don't lose basic cable. You just get HBO or whatever upgrade you want. So in Standish, for instance, we have 8 full-time contract deputies there. They want 24 hours a day, 7 days a week services. So we have 8 deputies there. We have 2 in Harrison. They just added on a new contract deputy up there. We haven't filled it yet because of staffing, but we've had a long-term contract up there for 35 plus years that I've been here. We have 2 contract deputies over in Gray. That's been in place for about 10 years or so. The second one was added a couple of years ago, and they provide 80 hours of service there. There are 5 contract deputies down in Harpswell. 3 of them provide law enforcement services. The other 2 provide marine patrol. Clamming is the major industry of Harpswell, so they want to protect it. So 2 deputies down there are assigned to making sure that licensing is done correctly, testing of water, making sure that people, when they dig clams, they're legal in doing so. They work with the State Marine Patrol periodically. And then they help out the deputies in Harpswell for backup. We have summer contracts that start on Memorial Day and on Labor Day. Let's back up. Out of 28 towns in Cumberland County, we provide law enforcement services for 15 of them. And the service population is about equal to the city of Portland. It's just spread out over those 15 towns. So 3 of the towns that we cover are islands. And they're geographically challenging to get to. So we put deputies from Memorial Day to Labor Day on the island of Chebeague, Long Island, and Fry Island. The deputies go out there. These islands pay for the deputies. They provide free room and board, so they want them to integrate into the community while they're out there. And it encourages them to stay on the island. So even though they put in 40 hours, they're there. If we need to call them out in an emergency, they get overtime, et cetera. Last year, we added the 3rd SRO. So now we've covered the major high schools within Cumberland County. We have 1 in Greater Gloucester. We have 1 that's been there for a long time in Bonnie Eagle, SAD 6. And then the newest one is Naples, or Lake Region High School, which covers Sebago, Bridgeton, and Naples. In addition to so those are the contracts. There are about 17 contracts and about 43 general revenue deputies / criminal investigators. We also have 10 criminal investigators. 1 is assigned completely to polygraphs. We have 1 assigned to Jonathan Sarbuck at the DA's office. That's been there for about 20 years. That investigator does all domestic violence follow-up based on their prosecutors to go out and do follow-up interviews, put in alarm systems, work with victims to try to get a successful prosecution. et cetera. We have one person that was assigned to MDEA. That person is left, so that's vacant. That main MDEA is Main Drug Enforcement. So we anticipate first of the year, somebody will be going to MDEA. And then the rest work on cases throughout the year. Jim, we can go to the next one. So I did mine a little different. The process is that we put our budget priorities on paper, and then Jim Gailey goes through it with us, and his role is to, obviously, we want a lot of things. His role is to tell us what we can get and what we won't be able to get. So, you know, our budget priorities coming into 2022 that may not be listed on your documents are video cameras. And I didn't see this as a budget, more like a CIP, or I don't even know if they're included or could be included in ARPA. But, you know, most law enforcement agencies now have video cameras. I've been a little late to the game because, first of all, for about 10 years or longer, we've always purchased 1 or 2 video cameras. Well, if you've got 43 people that have cruisers, you never get everyone having video cameras. So we've been just chasing our tail on that. So until we could get it right, we just weren't going down the video camera route. The other thing that is out there that technology hasn't caught up with is the fact that if I put a video camera on my chest or put one in the cruiser, that's all well and good. I think it'd be more desirable, but it's almost impossible right now with what we have for technology. That camera really needs to be what the eyes see, because it's really what you're evaluated on is what the officer is seeing, not what his chest is seeing, not what his car is seeing, but what his eyes are seeing. So I kind of held out for that, but I'm seeing that technology is not coming our way, and the requirement for video cameras really is. The other thing that really propelled this is that Taser, Axon, that does our tasers, and we all carry tasers, that's a non-deadly use of force tool, are up for renewal. They last 5 years. Axon has tasers and they have cameras, and the cameras that they have actually hook up to the tasers. So I put forward to the commissioners and Jim, you know, a proposal for 10 years, and that would include the body cameras and the tasers as a package, and then the video cameras in the cars as an add-on, if you will. The thought is it's coming our way. This is a good deal because everything is picked up. It's a big ticket item. When I saw it from my staff, it was, you know, I had price sticker shock. But the reality is we don't have to worry about IT. We don't have to worry about upgrades. We don't have to worry about anything breaking down. When you pay for it over this 10-year contract, any upgrades or anything is picked up by the company. It's very hands-free, including storage, which is a huge, huge nugget. The other budget priority is I've got a captain that just came back from some pretty good training. I've been at some good training, and employee wellness is really something that we want to get into. And it's beyond the typical EAP or some of the other things. And I'll go into the employee wellness and why that's important in a later slide. And then lastly, domestic violence. We work very closely, as most PDs, most police departments in Cumberland County work with Through These Doors. And the director of Through These Doors came to us about 9 months ago asking if they applied for a position so that an individual from our agency could focus on 20 hours a week of doing follow-up investigations, in addition to the DV investigator at the DA's office. You know, would we support that? And, you know, it's kind of like, would you support peace in the Middle East? How can you be against it? So we said that we would, be willing to support that. And there were 2 ways we could do it. That person would be an additional person picked up by this grant for 3 years, and the county commissioners would have to pick up the other part for at least 3 years and then pick it up completely. Or we would take one of our criminal investigators and we would just carve out 20 hours a week and have that person do that. So right now, if not funded, that's the way we're going to do it, because domestic violence is a huge, huge issue. We've seen a 54% increase. I just did an interview for Channel 13 last week, And we've seen a 54% increase in domestic violence cases as compared to last year and as compared to the years before, just since July 4th of 2021. So I guess the next page is good. Some of the things that, right out of the gate, we don't really control, so to speak, is the commissioners have their contract, the CBA, with the employees. So that's already settled. So those increases are already figured in. Obviously, medical insurance, we never know what that's going to be until we get into the budget season. Cost of fuel, boy, I'll tell you, we generally, this is a kind of an issue that we don't worry about, but with the cost of fuel going up, and we don't know how long that's going to be. Yeah, I think we've got it covered, but that worries me going into the future. Ammunition prices, that's been on a steady increase for probably 4 or 5 years now, 10% increases. And it's stuff that we need, but if I could cut it and get away with it, then I would do that, because we just keep spending money left and right on that. And then the last thing is the increase in costs of vehicles. We know that regular vehicles are hard to come by. Well, law enforcement vehicles are hard to come by too. The chip crisis and, the person that sets up our vehicles, that really comes out of the maintenance budget or facilities budget. They've already told us, be patient, because some of the stuff that we're ordering are back ordered, and they don't know what's going to come in. We ordered the cars in February, and we just took delivery about a week ago. So the cars for 2021 will likely be well into 2022 before we hit the road. So these are things that really kind of out of our control. All set. Next one, Jim. So these are the things that were cut. And like I said, I know that Jim and the commissioners don't have an empty a full checkbook where they can write anything. They got to try to balance the budget, and there are a lot of people asking things. But we asked for a 4 o'clock. If we get video cameras, it's not a matter of if. We will get 4 Freedom of Information requests. We will get every attorney wanting us to hold the videos for their defense. The DA's office will need those videos, et cetera. So right now, if we get video cameras and we don't get the position, then I don't need the video cameras, because without the position, I don't have staff that can take that on as a 20-hour a week. We think it would be 40 plus. And in talking to some smaller departments within Cumberland County that have video cameras, they have said it's not a matter of if, it will happen. Some of the increases in law enforcement, the half CID position, which I said, would be helpful, because I could keep the person that will be doing the reviews or the follow-ups through these doors. I can keep them working on cases. I mean, those cases continue. And I can actually have some of the other cases picked up that are kind of laying in suspension because of just the volume. Mobile fingerprint equipment was figured into this. There's been a law on the books that most police departments haven't even been following. And that's the fact that we do a lot of summons and release for misdemeanors. I use the crime of shoplifting. If somebody is caught shoplifting, we write them a summons. We don't take a fingerprint, then that summons may go through the court system. But after a person does a series of, and I think it's 3 shopliftings, it becomes a felony. Well, if the fingerprint is not registering with the State Bureau of Identification, then theoretically somebody could commit 3 shopliftings, get a summons, go to court, but because that's not in the State Bureau of Information, then that person will never be charged on the 4th time with a felony. So the state is mandated that anytime we summons in the field for an arrestable offense, that at some point within 5 days, we need to make sure that we get a fingerprint on that, and that fingerprint card's turned into the state. So as you can imagine, when you're covering 15 towns, you do have substations, et cetera. But the officer or the deputy has one of 2 choices. He can bring everyone into the jail, which that would be problematic because it's very busy there. Or they can go to a PD if they have the fingerprint equipment. But in some cases, you're going to a police department and then you're probably driving the person home and you're tying people up, you know. So with a mobile fingerprint equipment, we can take care of some of those issues, our own issues, and make it a little bit more efficient. Polygraph school training, I mentioned we have a polygraphist. That person's been on board for about 10 years, 8 to 10 years. We're in a process of hiring. About a month ago, I had 67 vacancies. I got about 64 now in corrections. And I've got about 3 or 4 law enforcement. So polygraphs are mandatory, and having a polygraphist on hand to do it saves us about $350 to $400 by doing the polygraphs, which are mandated. And quite frankly, even if they weren't mandated, this is not a place where we don't know cut back on, because we can call people that should not be in this line of work out rather quickly. The last item is add back ESU equipment line. Last year it was moved to some other account. So this was just a moving it back into the budget. It's really a flat line, but because it's moved back into the budget, it affects it. And again, it's not that we increased it, but it's one of those things where it impacted our budget. ESU is the Emergency Services Unit, which is a regional tactical team that we have. The civil budget is a $26,000 increase. What I did on this was about 3 years ago, I requested a 4th civil deputy because we have a handful, well, actually about 3 per diem people that have been serving civil paperwork for 20 some odd years. And I'd like to get up to a full-time because there's somewhat of a liability. The reality is that once we got the position, we had staffing issues because the staffing for civil comes from the corrections union. And we've got to mandate people over there. I chose not to fill that position. So for at least this year, it makes no sense to keep that on the budget when I'm not going to be able to fill it. And I probably won't be able to fill it next year as well. Okay, next. Thank you. So I mentioned the tasers. You know, if nothing else happens, we have to replace the tasers this year. And the only thing that makes it more appealing is that, again, for 10 years, you get the taser and the body-worn camera as a package. And there is a savings there. But providing the package is $2,261 per deputy per year. And then obviously that goes for a 10-year contract. The in-car video cameras, again, it's perspective that we're looking for. Whatever the body camera doesn't get, I'm hoping the car camera gets. It's not a panacea, but that's an extra $2,136 per vehicle per year for 10 years. And then obviously the clerk would start in July because it'd be impossible to get them up and running. Thank you. And this is, you know, I talked about the general revenue or basic cable. That's what it looks like for the cost of the county over the 1 year and the 10 year. And then obviously anyone that's working on a patrol contract would be charged off equally. So the patrol contracts show what a contract town would have to pay 1 year, or what the contract towns collectively would be paying, and then what they'd be paying after 10 years. Okay. This goes to the health and wellness. A couple of things. I mean, I quoted in here Kevin Hancock from Hancock Lumber. And then obviously the President's Task Force on 21st Century Policing back in 2015. There were 6 pillars. The number 6 pillar was officer safety and wellness. One of the things that we have not talked about is police suicide. We have police officers killing themselves more than the bad guys out there killing us. You know, and gone are the days where you chalk it up to an accidental discharge or, you know, something else. The reality is that, especially under COVID, we're starting to see people that are just, it's just added unbelievable stress. So we're looking to kind of get into this arena. There's a number of things we'd like to do. Obviously, you can't do it all at once, but I had set aside about $10,000 for that. And quite frankly, what I was thinking on this particular issue was for corrections, even the support staff. I mean, you know, you see a lot of things that just build up. And, you know, stress becomes trauma after it builds up a while. So I was looking at the potential of a law enforcement psychologist doing check-ins. It would be voluntary with the employees, and there would be check-ins once a year just to make sure that the person was doing well. And it would be with a person that has been in law enforcement, understands the profession. Okay, Jim, thanks. Life expectancy of a male back in early 2000s was 75.1. And another study said that you can take 7 years off it for anyone in law enforcement. You know, I had one of my supervisors tell me the other day, because of COVID, you can probably take another 2 years off it because of just the stresses of trying to deal with this thing. So next, please. These are some of the factors that, you know, quite frankly, we all struggle with. There are some people that keep themselves fit. And then there's still things in here that even if you keep yourself fit and eat well, you're constantly fighting. So see, these are some of the reasons why we're moving to a health and wellness as a profession. Next. And I mentioned the suicide thing. This is something that's really, unfortunately, we've seen it in our agency. 3 years in a row, I had retirees that took their life. And I think that if it isn't this year, it's got to be next year or the year after, but we got to start recognizing and talking about suicide publicly. And talking about the fact that when I first started, when Naldo, the chief deputy, first started, it was kind of a suck it up, move on, you know, and if you had any issues, if you brought it to anyone's attention, then you were ostracized and probably be pushed out of the profession. And we need to change that mentality. Next. You know, one employee said we spend tens of thousands of dollars to take care of our cars, our buildings, our grounds, our infrastructure, but we don't look at the mental, emotional, physical health of the deputies. So I know we have EAP. You know, most of our people have used the EAP for generalized stuff, but I'm talking about somebody going in and talking to somebody, having been involved in a trauma-like situation early in my career, 1994. I remember going into a psychologist because I had to, it was mandated because of the incident I was in. And I got absolutely nothing out of that because the woman was a general psychologist. You know, we're starting to see a lot of this stuff building up with our officers, and unfortunately, they're ticking time bombs. Next. I think we're close to the end, but this is about the DV investigator. I've kind of talked about that. The grant that Through These Doors has would reimburse the county 50% of $101,000 this year, $104 next year, and $106, and allow the investigator to work 20 hours to follow up on domestic violence related investigations that the DV investigator just can't get to. And I think that should be it. So a couple of things that I know have been asked that I haven't added is that we are a Triple Crown accredited agency. What that means is that since 2000, we've been nationally accredited for the jail. This is voluntary, it's not mandated. We're one of 2 county jails in the state that is accredited. We're accredited through NCCHC, which is the inmate healthcare. And we've been accredited with them for about 15 years, I believe. And every 3 years, we have people come in from the outside and evaluate us on the jail and the jail inmate healthcare. And then lastly, in 2015, our law enforcement got accredited through CALEA, again, voluntary. And, you know, we have to maintain our policies. And just because our policies say we got to make sure that we do what we say we do. Some of the things that are mandated because of these accreditations is training. And there's a lot of training. I mean, we're in the people business, and sometimes we're in the people business of people that are in trouble. So, and when I say trouble, it's not trouble criminally, but also mentally ill. So we have to go through all kinds of mental health training. We are prison rape elimination certified, which basically says that we have zero tolerance for any sexual assaults between inmate, officer, inmate, and anything like that. We have to really try and explain why we can't make sure, at least for law enforcement, that the makeup of our law enforcement agency has to reflect the communities we serve, which means, the Black community, Hispanic community, and others. A little bit of a challenge in Maine, but we strive for that. The other training that we go through, and the chief and I went to a training in Massachusetts about 5 years ago, and it was on the 21st century, presidential 21st century training. And we met an instructor by the name of Dr. Bryant Marks, who is a associate professor at Moorhead College in Georgia. And he does a phenomenal job at teaching implicit bias. So we've paid and sponsored him to come up a couple of times to train our people, whether it's corrections or law enforcement, as well as we've had him come up and not only do our people, but the Maine Sheriff's Association as well. I'm a member, and I've attended the fair and partial police training for Jocelyn. I think Pedro Vasquez from your town might be able to help you out with what that's all about. But it was a group of law enforcement leaders and members of the community that came together in May. We met again in July, and I think we're going to meet again in the next couple of months. Really talking about what's going on in law enforcement and why we do what we do, et cetera. We also do a fair amount of training and transgender. Our policy actually has been pretty well. I was interviewed for Time magazine several years ago from an individual that was in the military that was transgender and walked off. I'm trying to think what her name was, but our policies have been locked in since 2010 on how to manage transgender inmates. I've also spoken at national conferences on that. We're in the people business, and everything or every change that comes up, we try to be ahead of the game so that we can be a trendsetter and proactive. So that's really all I have, and I'll take any questions.
I appreciate you providing that. Excellent. I did want to offer Chief Deputy Naldo, if you have any insights that you wanted to add. I know you've patiently been waiting here as well. If you wanted to add any of your insights, things that you've seen, I'd be more than happy to give you the floor as well.
Well, the only thing I would mention that is not in this budget, and the sheriff alluded to it, to the jail in a status that, or a number that Jonathan Sarbeck threw out earlier this week to me, that 4% of all the people that are charged with crimes in the Cumberland County are the ones in jail. So their caseload is tremendous. But, I will say that 4% are in jail, and those people in jail, if you want to go and take a look at each one individually, I don't think you want to let them go. But that's another budget issue. But I just want to throw that out there. That number was astounding to me, that 4% are in jail of their caseload.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. A lot of information to take in. So, but I appreciate you kind of setting the stage here for us. Committee members, with what you've heard, want to offer any questions that you have for either individual tonight. Yeah, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Dustin. And thank you for that presentation. It was really good. Answered some of my questions. Thank you for answering the questions that I sent in previously. And I just want to be clear. Did you say that you do have on the budget this year a FOA clerk? That is something that you do have, that you're planning on bringing in?
Right now, it's off the budget because if I'm not able to get the video cameras, then I don't need the position. The video, if we get the video cameras, then I'll need the position. But if we don't get the video cameras, I won't need the position. The other thing I forgot to mention is right now we're on a positive list from Senator Susan Collins to get a direct contribution, if you will, for $250,000 towards the first year startup for video cameras. We'll see if it's passed the House, and we'll see if it gets through the Senate. But answering your question, Jocelyn, that's if I don't need the FOIA if I don't get the video cameras.
Right. Are you hopeful that you'll get the funding for the video cameras?
I am. I mean, the best thing to do is to get the officer's perception, and at some point I'd like to do it in the jail as well. When we go to move some mentally ill people in the jail, I'll use that for instance. I've got a video camera that basically says, if you've got time, go get the video camera and videotape that move and what you're trying to do to de-escalate the situation. And then what you try to do to get that resolved and the threats that come with it. And that's kind of worked for us. But there are a lot of things in the jail that I'm talking to a person and all of a sudden they take a swing at me. You can't run and get the video camera and things go badly. So, it's time for video cameras. Like I said, I probably will never get people wearing goggles that have video cameras on them. But like I try to tell the folks tactically, it's what the eyes see that everyone's evaluated on. I've seen some cases where people have video cameras and you can just watch YouTube where wherever they wear it on their chest may get the person's chest, if they're up close. If they back up, they might get something else. It's not a panacea, but it's going to help the officer. It's going to help the people we deal with. We tried some out a couple months ago, several months ago. I've got a couple of videos where I was like, man, I can't believe the customer service. Now, whether or not the person was playing to the camera, I don't know. But I will tell you, as a leader, I looked at it and go, man, those are so good because you can reward people for things they do. So probably a little bit more than what you wanted to hear for your question, but I think it's time that video cameras creep in, whether it's this year, next year, or the year following.
Yeah, I agree. And just to clarify again, did you say the position I love that you're working with Through These Doors. That's a great organization. Is that position funded, the 20-hour a week?
It is.
Okay, good.
And if we don't get funding, I will just take one of our detectives. I've talked to my criminal investigators, and it's not the best case scenario, but we have to do it to make sure our cases, because we're starting to see the increase in cases. We'll just pull back 20 hours that person's doing burglaries and other assaults and stuff. We'll pull that person back and just have them do 20 hours of follow-up with DV and anything else they can do on the other 20 hours.
Great. Thank you very much. Just a couple more questions. You said that it sounds like you are well-trained and know a lot about the transgender community. I'm wondering how you house folks that do you house them in the gender that they identify with, within the, whichever way that goes? So
it's how they identify is how they're treated. But we pull together a committee made up of classifications. Everybody has to go through classifications coming in, mental health, medical, and they meet on the next day or the following Monday and decide based on that individual's background, based on what they give them, they decide where that person is housed. So it's very lockstep with medical and mental health. And then the classification just is there because that's their job.
And is it in your budget and in your protocol to make sure that these folks have everything they need when they're incarcerated, as far as medication, hormone therapy, or any other gender affirming therapy?
Yeah, that's we spend about $3 million on our medical, and a lot of that's maintained. The medications and what we're required to do are mandated because we're accredited. So if ACA, American Correctional Association, has certain standards we have to meet with transgender, and also NCCHC has certain things. Sometimes they overlap and sometimes they're a little bit more stringent. And then we have to meet state standards too. But because we're nationally accredited, we meet a higher level than the state standards in that particular area.
Great. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Any other questions from community members? I just have a couple for you. This was sort of a two-part. You had mentioned the 68 vacancies, which now sounds like it's 64. What are some things that you're trying to do, or you've seen work to fill those vacancies? And the second part of that question is the budget items that we've seen in terms of wages and salaries. Is that based off of now that you have those vacancies, or is this what is the amount where you would expect full capacity? If everybody was hired, what does that look like compared to our budget? I'm just curious what that number is based on, given that you have so many vacancies.
It looks like Alice wants to, first of all, the vacancies are in corrections. So I'm not sure what you're looking at there for those vacancies. So Alex, you want to answer that?
Yeah, all budgets are based off of us having everyone hired. So we're always basing that budget under the assumption of everyone hired. It gets really hard when you get down into these places where you're so off from that, but there's no really good other option. You don't want to build a budget around not having it. So just want to jump in there.
No, I see that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, the answer, the recruiting thing, you see signs around if you drive around Cumberland County now. The big push, I think, was the county manager and the commissioners, putting a competitive wage out there, because we're competing against a lot of places that, are looking for people as well. And I think, COVID just exacerbated this issue because people are choosing or thinking about, do I want to do this the rest of my life? So we're competitive. In fact, the three that we've hired in the last month are two of which left within a year and decided that as the chief always says, the grass is not always greener, it's just a different shade of green. So they found out it was a different shade of green, they came back. One individual came from the state system because of the incentives and the work schedule we have. So we're trying to adjust work schedules as well. There's a lot of Neanderthals like myself that, you had to work weekends, night, holidays, etc. And the holidays and the nights will continue, but there's a different mindset out there now of giving people half of the weekend off, so we're trying to do that as well.
Gotcha. Yeah. One last question I'll throw at you, and since I know body cameras and the tasers are sort of a big budget item, something that it seems like you're pushing for. Axon as a company, the taser itself, do you know of any other technology that's on the horizon that would be better than that? Is there anything that you've come in contact with? And the reason I'm asking is, let's say you sign a contract with Axon, 2 years later, you knew this technology was out there better and it comes into being. Is there something that you're looking down the road saying, I could see that would be an improvement? Like, is there that there, or do you see that Axon as a taser is the best out there? There is no other comparison.
Axon is really the only thing out there for law enforcement. I mean, they're a sole source for that only. Video cameras, everybody's got a video camera that they want to cite. There have been companies that have tried to copy them, but, I'm not sure if there's anybody out there in research and development now that are trying to come up with something that's better. Taser's been around for about since 2004-ish. They seem to work, quite frankly, it's a good alternative. We don't use it very often, but when we do, it's helpful. Quite frankly, it's generally people have seen videos now where when they see a red dot on them, and if we've gotten that far, generally they're complying. So it's a good tool, and the reality is they only last about 5 years, and we're always replacing them. And like anything, you can't get parts. So this will be a whole new upgraded version.
Gotcha. And confirm with me, I know we had talked about this with Jim and Alex last week. These are the version where you pull and they would immediately put the camera on. It is that's the pack, that's the 10-year package that you are referring to here as well.
That is the version. In fact, we're going to go one step further in this package, where if you pull your firearm, it turns on the camera as well. I mean,
Yes. Yeah.
it's a switch that needs to be done. But again, going back to my past when we had these, is we had cars that didn't have them. We had cars that had them. Well, you know, if you had a bad incident and the car that went to the bad incident didn't have a camera, it was always a question of, you know, did you really have a camera in the car, or did somebody not turn it on? So having everyone have it just takes any of the ambiguity out of it. The other thing is having some so that if one breaks down, and they will, it won't cost us to replace it, but there's one on the shelf that we can put on the person so that they're not going a shift without a camera. Because again, that opens the question up of, was it really broken down, or did you not turn it on, or did you take it off and leave it in the car so that it would be on camera? We want to take that completely out.
Committee members, any other questions? Well, again, I really appreciate you, both of you, coming on and being patient with us and answering our questions. Great presentation, and I wish you all the best of luck in this year to come. I know it's a lot of work that you take on, and we are very cognizant of the efforts and the issues, especially around officer suicide. So we will definitely keep that in our minds as well. So thank you both.
Thank you for having us.
All right, just two more. Let me bring up the regional communications. Regional communications will be next.
Yes, thank you. I'd like to introduce Melinda Fairbrother Dyer. Melinda has been with the county for 15 plus years, working her way up through the rank and file, and ultimately finding herself in the director's seat as of this past March 2021. Melinda comes with a whole host of all levels of knowledge of the dispatch center. So I'll give Melinda the floor and let her present what she has this evening.
Thank you, Jim, and thank you, board members, for this opportunity. So like he said, my name is Melinda. I'm the brand new director of the 911 Center, but I'm not new to Cumberland County. So I'm quite appreciative of the opportunity to implement some ideas of things that I've seen and observed over the years. We employ 38 people at the 911 Center, one being me, the director, one deputy director, 7 supervisors, and 29 line staff. We're currently down 6 positions, technically 8. 2 of them are in training, so they're not useful, if you will, at the moment because they're in the training status. This is the largest shortage that we've seen since I've been here. So it is for sure posing a challenge. Many reasons why we're down. Most recently, the last handful of people that left cited some mental health dynamic to it. Part of my goal in this role is to bring more awareness to the 911 Center and the challenges and the types of calls that the 911 call takers handle, because we're pretty good about recognizing police, fire, and EMS and PTSD and mental health challenges, but oftentimes the 911 industry is left behind. And I think it's probably because we're not seen. We're the ones that people hear, but they don't really see what we're doing. So part of my goals are going to be to bring more awareness to that. And by doing so, the hope would be to retain our employees and put more focus on employee retention versus recruitment efforts. I think if we find that balance of taking care of the people that we have and making them feel valued, that the product that they put out is going to show. And I think that people are going to have more of a tendency to want to be part of this team if they see that being put out there. Um, One of the questions that Jim suggested to kind of ponder would be if you had more money, how would you spend it? And I quite honestly would do just that. I would invest far more intentionally in the mental health of our employees, create a solid infrastructure so that we could actually be a consolidated 911 center. We are a regional consolidated center, but we haven't quite achieved that level of consolidation where we're completely sharing resources. We're more so that we're housed in one building under the same light bill, but that's about the extent of what we've done for consolidation there. Last year's call volume was just shy of 90,000. And what was interesting is our call volume didn't go down. Much like the sheriff has pointed out, it shifted. The calls that were taken are far more serious. Mental health is, I would say, every other call. Domestic violence has gone from verbal domestics were kind of the norm, and physical high-level domestic violences were once in a while, and now we're seeing them multiple times a day. And I think all of that is linking directly to the mental health and wellness of our first responders, which does include the dispatchers. We dispatch or provide dispatch services to 19 of the 28 communities in Cumberland County, 5 law enforcement agencies, one of them being the Cumberland County Sheriff's Office, the Wyndham Police Department, the Gorham Police Department, Bridgeton Police Department, and Cumberland Police Department. And the coverage area that the sheriff showed you, we cover all of that plus these 5 police departments that I just mentioned. Any questions?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that, and thank you for the overview. I'll open it up to committee members. Committee members, any questions that you have? So I'll start with a question as well. I know you mentioned if you had more money, it would be spending it in sort of mental health, creating that infrastructure. Give me a little bit more. What's the infrastructure you'd hope to create? Are you talking about bringing in somebody? Are you talking about creating spaces for many of your staff to sort of find ways to process what they're going through? I mean, what does that infrastructure look like, or what could you envision?
Yeah, so those were actually intended to be 2 slightly separate things, but the mental health side of it, I don't have a complete vision on what it would look like, but much like what the sheriff pointed out, starting with just acknowledging it. We come from a field of, and I'm only talking 3 years ago, where we would tell people, oh, if that bothered you, you probably need to go find another job. But we kind of need people to do this job, and we need to acknowledge that these are significant calls that people are handling, and we're not born necessarily to just take the call and move on. And it's okay to admit that it was troublesome or bothersome. So I think, we talk about the EAP, and I literally have been on hold with the EAP trying to help employees get connected. And our EAP service is top notch. They really are super. If you call, they're going to answer. But the hold part is they're going to give you a list of resources, and you're going to call them, and nobody has openings. So I've had a few people that have left recently that actually cited that you tried, the resources are there, the county funds this program. But the fact remains that with COVID, everything is suffering, to include the mental health field. So you have more mental health problems and you have fewer people doing the work. Not sure that I have the answer to that. I think that that's bigger than this committee and myself. But yes, physical space for people to just take a break. We've started simple. We got a picnic table up front and some chairs for people to just go outside and take a breather. The infrastructure that I speak of is more so that, so we provide services to 19 fire EMS departments. They all have their own radio. We provide services to 5 police departments. They all have their own radio. We provide services to a handful of animal control officers who communicate with us. Public Works, and each of us that works here have exactly 2 ears, and we cannot hear all of these people talking at the same time. So the infrastructure that I speak of is consolidating what we're asking these people to listen to, but we need the infrastructure in order to do that. I can't ask 2 police departments to talk on the same frequency without a robust infrastructure that makes that possible.
Gotcha. No, that I appreciate that clarity. That does help. Now I get a little bit better picture. So no, I completely understand. Committee members, any other additional questions? Any other follow-ups? Lee, go ahead.
Just real quick, looking at your revenue side, do you bill per call? Is that where the revenues come from, or is it a contracted rate? How does that get figured in, I guess is the question. Because I mean, I'm looking at us and Wyndham, right? The 2 big ones there. So Gorham and Wyndham, trying to figure out where that rate comes from.
Alex has his hand up for that one. Unless you want me to answer it, Alex, I'm happy to.
Yeah, and first off, sorry for the background noise here. I am dealing with a parental issue at the same time as this a little bit, but it is based off of population, based off of the most recent census, and then there's a per capita rate built into it. Rates differ depending on the level of service that a community is requesting. If a community is only looking for just say emergency services, but no police, they'll pay a lower rate. If it is sort of all in, it's that higher rate.
Okay. So with that said, the 2022 revenue, I could pretty much brief my finance director. That's what's coming across the bow here for an increase, is what you're saying to me right now.
Yeah, for 2022,
Yeah.
but heads up on 2023. Because
perfect, thanks.
That's when the new census comes out. Well, we've got the new census out, but a lot of these contracts haven't expired yet.
Right, yep,
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, 2020, the census will have some impacts.
Good question. I appreciate that. And that's good for all of us to sort of know and take stock of that coming 2023.
Yep.
Committee members, any other questions that you have? Yeah, Jocelyn.
Thank you, Dustin. And thank you, Melinda, for your presentation. Really, really good. I'm assuming this is in the budget book. Is this the emergency management? No. Okay. For some reason, I cannot find it in here.
CCRCC is the acronym, or Cumberland County Regional.
Oh, okay, okay.
Page 102.
102. Thank you. I just went through this like 6 times. There it is. Great. I'm sure. So yes, I'm going to ask a similar question, and I'm sure that y'all do a lot of training, because that's part of what you do, right? Is to be able to come to the table and do crisis management, et cetera. So maybe could you just give us a little bit of like what your budget includes for that, what kind of training your staff does?
Sure. We're a lot like the sheriff's office in that we have things that we're certified in, and continuing education that we have to maintain. I'm sure, as you can imagine, just like with any of the industries that you folks are affiliated with, COVID put a different twist to that. So we've had to embrace online stuff a little bit more, which actually was a benefit to us because we could fit more in for the same kind of budgeting. What it took away from us was people aren't able to get out of the building and have that layer of meeting other people in the industry and camaraderie and whatnot. But we are trained emergency medical dispatchers, and we have been for, that actually was implemented the year that I started here. So for about 15 years, we've been trained in emergency medical dispatching through a national certification, which basically gives you paramedic type service over the phone until the paramedics get there. We can deliver babies, we can provide CPR instruction, we can administer things to help slow down a heart attack symptoms and things like that. We're also emergency fire dispatch trained, where we can give pre-arrival instructions in the event that we had a fire that required it. And actually, we did just have one the other day where victims had to be rescued from a burning home. And that also maintains continuing education credits to go along with it. Other than those two certifications, there's not a ton that the industry mandates. So a lot of what we do is voluntary education. So as an industry, when we talk about things like racial bias and things like that, there are no standards for us. We voluntarily subscribe to that kind of stuff and voluntarily put our staff through those types of trainings, but we're still working on having 911 even be recognized. We're not, in a lot of forums, we're not recognized as first responders. Yet I'm telling you that we lose employees from mental wellness type impact. And some of that is because we're not recognized. That you'll never hear a call where the dispatcher was like, save the day. It's usually whoever got there first, whether it be police, fire, EMS, they're typically the hero, but we do deliver babies over the phone. We participate in saving lots and lots of drug overdoses. There's a lot of folks that when we get the call, they're not breathing. By the time first responders get there, they are breathing. So just kind of putting more of our own standards out there to keep our staff at the level that we're looking for them to be at.
That's great. So you're what you're saying, y'all are not considered first responders?
In most forums, no. When you talk about retirements, it would be really hard to stay in this job until retirement age, but currently that is the standard. So if you could imagine having to answer 911 calls for 40 or 50 years, that is our current dynamic. So we don't typically have people retire from this industry.
Right.
We usually lose them a little bit quicker than that.
Right. All right. Thank you very much. That's all the questions I have.
Committee members, any other questions? To Jocelyn's question, I actually was curious. I know hate crimes have actually been on the rise, but are you getting an increase in hate crime calls or anything that would fall under that?
So I'm not sure that we could necessarily put a number to that because we're taking the call and kind of giving it a cursory label, if you will. For instance, they don't compare, but we don't, we take car accidents. We don't take fatal car accidents. They end up being fatal car accidents after somebody gets on scene and learns that that is the dynamic. But when we take it, it's a car accident. So that's probably more of an in-depth look at what's really going on. But when we get it, it's a bar fight. But it has these added dynamics to it that we just don't know about. Where that probably has impacted us the most is, again, much like the sheriff's office, we had a lot of riots and protesting and whatnot this year that were, I would say, a huge factor for our dispatchers. It created a lot of fear for our first responders. And I would have to think that, yes, that definitely was a factor at those types of situations. Not all of them, but some of them. Some of them were incredibly peaceful and productive, but you never knew which one. So we staffed up and prepared for the worst and hoped for the absolute best.
Gotcha. Yeah. So I apologize for my question. It sounds like it would fall under, if it's a hate crime, you're not going to label it as that. You're going to say it's an altercation. It's like a physical altercation. And that will then get assessed when responders arrive on scene, basically.
Sure. The only time we would know that it was a potential hate crime is if somebody outright told us that, because we can't see anything. We're just listening. We have no clue what the real dynamic is. We just know that we have people fighting. It could be a man and woman. It could be any type of race, but we don't know those pieces of the puzzle necessarily.
Gotcha. No, I appreciate that. Thank you for the clarity. Community members, any other questions? Excellent. Well, Melinda, thank you very much. Really appreciate your time with us, and good luck to you in all of you're doing, all the work that you're doing. And we're hoping for peace of mind, as a lot of folks are working hard and going forth from here. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Last but not least, Cross Insurance Arena will be our final conversation that we'll have tonight.
Great, thank you. I'd like to introduce Melanie Henkes. Melanie is the general manager over at the Cross Insurance Arena. She has been the general manager for, what, 3 years now, Melanie?
Yes.
In that ballpark. Previous to
I
that.
came in at a good time, right before pandemic.
And so before that, she was the director of events for the center. One thing I should explain is that Melanie is not a county employee. The county actually contracts to a national firm who specializes in arena management. And so Melanie is an employee of Spectra Management Services, and they're headquartered out of Pennsylvania. But we treat Melanie just like a staff, and all of her staff over there. So as well as we see, they're all county staff member to us, even though their paycheck comes from somewhere else. So Melanie, the floor is all yours, and I'll load up your slide here in a minute.
Yeah, if you, whenever you get a chance, if you'll show that slide, because that is going to be the main thing that we kind of live and breathe off of as I talk. Can everybody see that one page?
Yes.
Okay, good. So this is going to be the one page that we kind of live and breathe off of as I walk you guys through the budget. This is going to be the kind of the income statement. It's the 30,000 foot view for the entirety of the budget. So instead of flipping back and forth, I'm going to walk you guys through this document, and by the end of it, you should have a really good grasp as to what we've got going on in the arena. But a couple of housekeeping tips. This document was put together in February. So contractually, I owe Jim a copy of the budget by April 1st. So usually January, February, March is when I'm putting this together. So normally when I put a budget together, there's a lot of forecasting and a lot of projections that I am including in the budget in its entirety. So one of the things that we did a little bit different this year was Jim and I wanted to take a realistic look as to where we were at kind of February and March. And the reason that we did that is because it was going to produce a budget that was, barring anything crazy with pandemic, was really going to produce a budget that was more worst case scenario. And then we knew as things developed and unfolded, it was most likely going to get better. But even as I was trying to put this together, there were so many conversations that were happening between promoters trying to rebuild their own staff and trying to get tours out, even in a matter of weeks. You know, I thought at the beginning of February, I wasn't getting Disney on Ice, which is, you know, processing 22,000 people through the building. And then 4 weeks later, they called me back and said, hey, we can come. Do you have the dates? So as we walk through, I kind of approach this document by columns. That first column is going to be the budget that we have projected for the upcoming year. The second column is going to be actuals of the 1920 season. And then that fourth column over is the 1920 budget. And the reason I'm kind of telling you guys, when I walk through this, I like to toggle back and forth so I can discuss the variances and the numbers so you guys can understand the fluctuations as to why I'm saying revenue is going to increase or decrease, because it'll change year to year. But the final housekeeping note is a lot of the buildings in our company use the 18-19 season to compare against, and that really wasn't a fit for us for a couple of reasons. There were events in that season that just no longer exist for us. Maine Mammoths, the arena football team was still in play. Sesame Street, Cisco Deering, some of those events just aren't around anymore, or for different reasons, they're not coming to the arena, and it's nothing that we did. But it was just kind of adding more mud to already muddy waters. So that's why it was a little bit easier to compare to the 1920 budget. Had pandemic not happened, that was a really good budget. It was very well researched based off of a lot of historical information, and it was aggressively achievable. So when pandemic happened, we had just booked Neil Young, and I thought that's going to be the event that takes us across the finish line. We're going to make budget. And then I think 3 weeks later, pandemic happened, and then everything exploded and I didn't make budget. So that's why you're looking at that. I want to compare against a partially completed year, but I will tell you if we need to look at the fourth column, I'll kind of help you guys navigate that. But jumping in, that first line, you can see that number of events that we projected for the upcoming year was going to be 78 events. So when pandemic happened, we had gotten to 67 events in the 1920 season. But if you look at that fourth column, you can see going into the event year, we had been projecting around 102. Our normal event load for a year is usually around 100 to 110. That's a normal year for us, but you can see right now, or in February, March, I was saying, hey, 78 events, I know, barring anything crazy, they're going to come. I've either got a contract with them or it was an existing event that had to get rescheduled and the can got kicked down the road. So 78 events is where we started. And if you'll go down 6 lines, that'll get you to the gross ticket revenue line. And that's exactly what it sounds like. It's the amount of revenue that we generate from ticket sales, which is 3.1 million. If you're comparing it to the fourth column to 5.3 million, so that gives you kind of a bar for what we do during a normal year. But one thing that, to play devil's advocate for myself, and I kind of like to share people or teach people kind of how to read my budget and poke at it a little bit. One thing that I would tell people if you're looking at this is, hey, you're telling me that you're increasing your event load from 1920. So when pandemic happened, you ended at 67 events and you're telling me that you're going to get 78 events, then why has your ticket sales gone down? If you have more events, why are your ticket sales going down right there? And the reason is because I had a lot of concerns as to what the customer, the consumer was going to do with their discretionary income in the fall. I didn't know how long unemployment was going to last, were social distancing restrictions still going to be in play, were vaccines even going to be out? And if they were, was everybody going to have access to them? So a lot of the events that we had in the fall, I was very conservative in my projections. PBR was one of them that I reduced their ticket sales by 10%. Maine Mariners, the first half of their season, I reduced their ticket sales by 5.5%. UMaine Hockey was another one that I reduced by about 11%. So I was trying to be strategic with what was the consumer going to be doing when we got back online. Just because we got back online didn't mean that everybody was going to feel good about coming into a mass gathering. So that's why you're seeing that variance right there. The next line down is tenant charges. Those are the revenues that go back to the promoters when we have events. But one of the things that this line kind of dovetails into is that next line down, which is net rent income. Net rent income is exactly what it sounds like. It is the amount of rent that I will charge somebody for coming and utilizing the facility. They're utilizing our time and our space. But this line item gets into a really fun conversation of what our event mix looks like. And so when Jim hears me talk about my event mix, he knows that I'm referencing the different deal structures that I can have with events. So it can be a rental deal, like I just mentioned, or it can be a co-pro when I'm co-promoting with somebody. And that means that I am taking on the risk of the show, meaning I'm willing to put all of the revenues and the expenses back in the pot when the show is done. But if the show doesn't sell well and I'm left with nothing but expenses and very little ticket revenue, then I've incurred more risk by taking on that show. But that is going to be either reflected in the net rent line right there, or if you look a couple lines down, you'll see surcharge and facility fee and ticketing convenience fees. So when I'm talking about the event mix right there, the money is going to end up in one of 2 lines. It's going to end up in the net rent income, or it's going to end up down in the ticketing revenue line with surcharge and ticketing convenience fees, because I'm getting access to that ticketing money. So net rent income. So right now you can see that it's at $489,000 in comparison. If you go over to the fourth column of $497,000. So if I were reading this on another building, I would say, okay, it looks like they have a lot of rental deals that year, but not as much as they had for the 1920 season. And so this year we're heavy on our rental deals. I had a lot of shows that got rescheduled when pandemic happened that were based on that certain deal structure. And so that's why I'm saying you will normally see more revenue in that line item versus down in the surcharge and the ticketing convenience fee line. And then move one line down to net service income or loss. That is our expenses. So you can see that right there, it's around $334,000 in comparison to the fourth column of 286. And that's naturally going to happen because it's more expensive to run the building right now. If you think about cleaning costs have gone up, minimum wage, it's just painful. It hurts. It cuts me deep. But there are a lot of our expenses that have naturally gone up. And so that's why you're naturally going to see that line item of our expenses going up for all of the shows. Then that gets us down to direct event income of $155,000. And then moving down to suite revenue. Suite revenue is exactly what it sounds like. It's the amount of revenue that we can generate from renting the suites at certain events. And we'll get down this a little bit further. Suites can be reflected one of two ways. It can be rented off one-offs, or it can be wrapped up in a bundle for sponsorship revenue. And so right here, this is where we're saying for individual suite rentals will generate about $11,000. And we've got a pretty strong lineup of concerts. And so that's why you're seeing that increase in comparison to the 9,946. If I had gotten to complete the 1920 season, that $9,000 would have been a lot higher. I kind of have PTSD right now because I have just as strong of a lineup, and I'm like, if I don't get to complete this year, man, I'd be another swing and a miss. So that line item will probably end up being higher because I'll have more suites to rent since I've recouped some more concerts coming up. Surcharge and facility fee and the ticketing convenience fees. Those are the fees that when you go online and purchase, you are paying for the convenience of being able to purchase at home. And so right there, you can see that we've got $181,000 of surcharge and facility fees, and then the ticketing convenience fees right there. And then that gets us to our total revenue of $317,000. Ancillary income, moving on down. So ancillary income for us is going to be anything outside of ticketing revenue, which is going to be concessions when you guys come in and eat concessions. Or if you are like Sue and you have to take your kids to Disney on Ice and then you can't get to your seat because you have to purchase all the toys that they throw on the concourse and it is so painful to get in your seat. So concessions and novelty income are going to be what we're projecting for the upcoming year, which is roughly around $419,000. But a normal year for us, you can see over in column 4, is roughly around $663,000. And so that is a very clear reflection of that's just a reduction of the events. That's why I'm showing less revenue right there. I haven't toggled the numbers at all because I was kind of under the mindset, if somebody is spending the money to come to an event in the fall, they're not going to come in and say, no, I'm not going to drink that beer at the hockey game. They have the income to come in and go ahead and spend and be okay about it. There's not going to be a lot of people that don't come in and don't have the beer or the nachos. And so that's why I really didn't go in and toggle those the way I did the ticket sales, like I did up above. So that gets us down to our event operating income of $892,000. And then other income moving down is going to be really a lot of sponsorship related items. So sponsorships, naming rights, luxury suites, and other rentals. So the one item that I want to talk about is advertising and sponsorship. So when we went into pandemic, and I remember the first day that I didn't have to go into work, I clearly remember thinking, we'll be out of this in a month, it'll be fine. And which is really laughable right now. But when this happened, when we had to shut down, we were in an immediate breach with all of our sponsors, meaning I was starting to owe them time. I had breached my contract because I couldn't open up and have events. And so it was basically kind of like a imaginary clock started. And so the original thought going into that was we will make them whole on the back end of their contract. So if we go dark for a month and they have a 1-year contract, I'll just turn it into a 13-month contract and I won't show any revenue that month, but I'm going to make them whole as far as time goes. So the longer that this stretched on meant it was going to be a longer period of time I was dark or I wasn't showing any revenue on my financials. And so they're kind of got to be a breaking point of this, okay, this approach doesn't make sense anymore. And so what we decided to do was amortize the length of the contract with time. So we extended the contract for however long we were dark, and we amortized the payments out. So I think the best way that I explained this was, if you guys know Sam Surprise, he loved this one. If I entered into a contract with Sam Surprise Hair Care Products, and it was a $12,000 deal for 1 year, that meant that Sam owed me $1,000 every month. But as pandemic went on, if I owed him a year's worth of time, I told Sam, look, we'll make it a 2-year contract, and then your monthly payments to me are $500 a month. So we basically just stretched out the payments over a longer period of time, which is why you're seeing advertising sponsorship, if you compare it to the fourth column, the $305,000 versus the $334,000. I didn't have sponsors drop off. Zach did a really great job of managing those relationships and the conversations and the expectations, but I'm just taking the same amount of money and stretching it over a longer period of time. And so that's what is continuing to happen on the next several line items down, because they're all partners, they're all contractually related to the building. And so that's why I'm showing lower amounts of revenue right there. So naming rights is at $150,000. We are in year 8 of a 10-year contract, and we have already gotten them to renew for another 10 years. So that agreement will go out to 2034. And then luxury suites and loges and club suites, those are the suites that are wrapped up into sponsorship agreements for us. And that's going to fall under the same umbrella. It's just the same amount of revenue that's being stretched over a longer period of time. And then other rentals for us is going to be Ticketmaster mail order fees, ATM fees. We do get to recoup some fees on the ATMs that we have in the building. And then about $35,000 worth of high school hockey rentals. So when the Mariners aren't on the ice, we do get to utilize the facility in a really great way. It's not every day that the local high school kids get to play on a huge slab of ice in a big arena, but they rent it out hourly. And so it's really great not to have the arena dark. But that gets us to total other income of $573,000 versus our $638,000 in 2020, when we were about 3/4 of the way through the season. And then moving down, indirect expenses is at $2.4 million, and I would probably compare this to the fourth column of the other $2.4 million. And so again, I'll play devil's advocate on myself of, okay, how is it that you can have less events, but your expenses are almost exactly the same? And that goes back to a couple of things. We've had 2% cost of living increase. I'm now fully staffed. Well, almost. I've got 2 positions left to fill. But if you know, during the 1920 season, we were going into, unfortunately, staff reductions, salary reductions. We hadn't gotten to the salary reductions at that point, but some of the employees were starting to fall off payroll. And then also a couple of savings in the indirects, finance. There's about $24,000 savings benefit there. And then since we had reduced events, we were showing some savings in F&B. With as far as nonprofit labor goes. So we got to pull that out some. But overall, we were budgeting this season in the hopes that, we would get back to having a full season as far as expenses go. So we were including full-time salaries on there and everything. But net operating income, that gets us to a loss of $980,000. It still hurts to kind of say that. But I'll end on a positive note. In going back up to the first line item, we were taking a snapshot of where we were at in February, March at 78 events. And right now I'm at 98 events. So I'm almost back to where we were in non-pandemic times. Again, knock on wood, because I had PTSD saying, we're going to finish strong, and then pandemic happened. But we've almost gained back all of the ground that we lost when we were going into pandemic. So I don't envision that we are going to be at a $980,000 loss as long as we get to finish the event season and nothing crazy happens. So that's my positive to end on. And I think Jim and I kind of budgeted well as far as let's show worst case so we know what we're really dealing with if that happens. But I think it's, we are going to kind of keep moving up. Do you have any questions?
Oh, I'm sure our committee members have tons of
Oh.
questions. I will,
Yeah.
I'll start with Paul. Paul, I see your hand, so why don't you kick us off? Oh, here you go, Paul.
Yeah, yeah, I got, boy, where to start? Let me start with the numbers that, to make sure I understand that the numbers that I think might not be on this sheet. In the budget book that we look at, there's items for like repayment, I think, of bonds and interest. And I know, Jim, you had spoken also about potential like capital investments. Before I get into this sheet, is it fair to say that those other items aren't on this sheet?
Yes, correct.
Yes, the
Okay.
bond sits outside of the cross insurance arena budget.
Okay, so if someone was to really step back and look at the results, the full results of the facility, you would probably want to add in those building expenses, those repayment expenses, to really get a true picture of what the entire facility is costing. But I'll move down from that to ask about the management contract itself and how is it structured? Because I hear Melanie, I hear you speaking about, you have a staff and you employ people and whatever, but is the county paying some kind of fixed or formula variable costs for management, sort of under the general management contract?
Jim, do you want me to take, or?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so the answer to that is yes. So there is a monthly management fee that Jim, in his budget, accounts for as far as what's sent to corporate for us to manage the building on a monthly basis.
Okay, so that's another expense that's really missing from this net operating income, and I understand why. I mean, I understand how I'm starting to understand how it's structured, but so I guess my working now into this spreadsheet, my next question kind of would be, putting all those other expenses aside, the fourth column over was budgeted for a loss of 400,000 on a operating income basis. Would that be sort of a normal year expectation? I mean, I understand this year it's gone to 1 million, but sort of a normal year operating income, you budgeted for a loss of 400,000. Would that be sort of typical?
Yes, it would. And I would say yes, prior to pandemic. I think that we will have a new baseline post-pandemic because all of our expenses now look completely different before pandemic. But yes, that is what a normal year would look like for us prior to pandemic.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question so other people can ask questions.
No, you're good.
Going up to the sort of the big ticket items, the gross ticket revenue and the tenant charges. Mm-hmm. You're saying it's the difference between those two items are really like maybe your big ticket revenue item, maybe concessions in some years, but whatever. But I'm struck by the fact that in column 4, because you had 102 events and you had that much more tickets, et cetera, but you still really were only netting rent income of 500,000, which is really the same amount of net income that you're going to net on 78 events. So I guess what I'm trying to understand is, as you add more events and you scale back up, would the expectation be that net rent income would stay about there and the improvement would come from concessions, novelty income, all the other sort of auxiliary items?
So it will, it's yes and no. And again, it goes back to what is my deal structure for the totality of all of the events. So remember, I toggled back and forth between the net rent income line. And then if you go down, I think it's 4 lines to surcharge and facility fee. That's where you'll see the fluctuation in, as I gain more events, what does the deal structure of those events look like? So if the deal structure is heavily based as just a flat rental deal, where I don't get to touch any of the ticketing revenue, then yes, you're going to see that net rent line, you're going to see that one increase. If my deal structure is based more on the co-pros, meaning I'm throwing all of the ticketing revenue and all of the expenses back in the line, then as the event load increases, you will see the surcharge and facility fee line increase. But yes, that's where that fluctuation would come from. And that's what I was really saying. The reason that those look similar is that in 1920, my deal structure was more co-pro based, but in this upcoming year, I'm saying it's more rent based. So that's why it kind of looks like in 1920, I had 102 events versus my 78, but I'm still, it's almost like I'm competing line for line as far as rent goes, because the deal structure is a little bit different. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that all makes sense. Although I would think in the deal structure that you'd have difficulty carving out a bigger share for yourself from the acts that were clearly almost guaranteed to be the most popular, right? I mean, they would know that they're gonna come in and that they're gonna sell out, and they would probably not be as I don't know that part of the business, but you just have to guess.
Well, it's kind of, it's I like where your head's thinking. It's strategy. So if you know that you're going to come in and sell out, why would you want to limit yourself to just ticket sales? Wouldn't you want to come to me and say, hey, I'm willing to split these ticket sales, but I want to cut up your other revenue streams, which includes concessions, merchandise. Some buildings have parking in there. So it kind of depends on the approach that you want to take. Some of the promoters want to be able to have access to not just one revenue stream, but multiple.
Right, but bottom line, they would be looking at, if they were a promoter of a major act, they would be looking at adding those other components because they were guessing that they could come out net regardless of what line item you put in, that they'd come out ahead.
Correct.
Okay, I'll let others ask questions.
No, this is fine. You're fine.
Oh, no, these are great questions. And as you're asking too, Melanie, I'm assuming too that in every situation, in every category you have had to have prices increase, whether it's renting the facility, concessions, auxiliary. Is that the case when I'm comparing these two columns? Should I just assume you've had to, or are your renting fees, are you keeping them fairly flat pre-pandemic, post-pandemic?
No, I have gone up a little bit as far as my rent goes, but I did not budget for that. That has been based on conversations after the budget got put into play, partially because I kind of wanted to see what other competing buildings were doing. I didn't necessarily want to jack up my prices and then kind of price ourselves out of the market. So that decision came after the budget got put in play.
Gotcha. Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. Committee members, any other questions? Jocelyn, please go ahead.
Thank you. Melanie, thank you very much for the line by line. That was really helpful actually to go through it that way. Yeah, that was really good. Just wondering if y'all are receiving any ARPA funding or any other for-profit relief funding from the state or the government or whatever. I'd be interested to know if that funding is coming in for you.
It is. We are utilizing that to help offset some of our part-time wage increases to be able to compete with other local venues. I don't know that we are the leading venue as far as what we're paying our part-time employees, but we do have, I'll brag on them a little bit. I have some really good guest services worker and F&B workers. And so I was personally very nervous as to whether or not we were going to even get them back, partially because as far as guest services go, that's not their full-time job. They call it their fun money, and their average age, I'd say, would be late 50s, early 60s. So they were definitely falling in that category as far as COVID goes, of potentially being extra cautious as far as mass gatherings go. So as the minimum wage kept going up, we did a comparison to some of the other buildings, and we were definitely lagging behind. So we've got a plan to utilize those funds to be able to stay competitive and make sure that we are getting really good workers to come in and incentivize them to come back to work. And then some of the other ARPA funds that Jim and I have discussed are there's a half house curtain that we have that we are going to try and utilize some of the funds for. That will give us, that'll basically what that is, and you've probably seen it if you've gone into a graduation. It's the really big black curtain, the backdrop. That will help, that you can basically cut down your room. And so what that would give us the ability to do is to go after artists who they might not sell out with 7,000 tickets, and they wouldn't consider our venue as an option to play. There's no artist that, if he's going to sell 1,000 tickets, wants to be looking at a sea of empty seats and just 1,000 people. So that will help, that will give us a competitive advantage to be able to go and kind of recoup some of the funds that we seem to bleed out in the start of pandemic in 2020. So right now, that's what the ARPA funds are going to be used for.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I just had a question. You said an interesting thing earlier, and I just want to get clarity on what you meant. You said something about the minimum wage going up and how that hurt and cut you deep. I'm just interested by that comment. What does that mean?
So as far as, like, if you look at my net service income line of $334,000, before pandemic, I think the minimum wage was $11, and then it went up to $12.12. That was a $67,000 swing for me as far as the event season goes. So for me to recoup that one line item, as far as my event goes, it goes back to what Dustin asked me. Did you have to increase your rent? So it makes it so I'm having to charge other people more to be able to operate. And so to stay competitive against other buildings, when we're bookended by two buildings that have higher capacities than I do, so they can sell more tickets to offset those expenses. That makes it very hard. So when I say it cuts me deep, it's not that I don't want people to get paid for the work that they are doing. It makes it hard to compete against other buildings, to get really good shows.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarity. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Other questions from committee members? I'll go with Lee, and then I'll get you, Paul. Go ahead, Lee.
I can't see Lee on my screen.
It's all right.
So I can appreciate the breakdown of incomes and losses of incomes and whatever else. Is there a way we can get a breakdown of the indirect expenses? Just because my inner accountant basically is twitching at $2.4 million of indirect expenses, I guess is the best way to put it. It's just a hard number to swallow. That's all for it. Just one little block called indirect. Basically, there's going to be something that's direct in there, I guess, is really my point. So
absolutely,
I'd just like to see a breakdown of that.
I can tell you a large portion of that is going to be utilities. In the winter months, our utilities alone are $30,000. So that's one of the big line items. But yeah, we can definitely get that for you.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. I appreciate it. Paul, go ahead.
Somewhat related to that is I'd like to get from Jim the actual management fee number that we could expect, and the actual, I guess, debt payments, and whatever else, any capital investments, but whatever would give the full picture of the facility as well as its, operating around shows, et cetera. So if we, regardless of which budget that they're in, I just like to get a full view of all the expenses associated with the Cumberland County Civic Center. And I guess maybe I'd also like to hear, and I don't know if it's from Melanie or it's from Jim, as to what the expectations are, not necessarily next year, but what the expectations are for the ongoing performance. I was struck particularly again by the fourth item over that kind of said, well, this is a normal operating year and we're going to have an operating loss of 400,000, plus we're going to have management expenses, plus we're going to have capital repair expenses. Is that the projected sort of run rate going forward and as the cost of the facility, or is there some kind of planned strategy to bring that gap down?
Well, I think that going back to the use of the ARPA funds, I mean, that's what the half house curtain, that's what the attempt is there, is to make us a more viable option for other artists that we would normally not be able to seek out. So I also want to say it is not an attempt to steal anything from the state or Aura. There's kind of a gap in our market for the seating capacity between 2,000 to 3,000. That's going to exceed what the state has, what Aura has. And so there is an artist that, that the state can sell out. They could sell out in, they could do a 2-show play and sell it out at 1,800 seats. But then the question becomes, could I have that one night and sell it out for that artist at 3,000 tickets? So that is part of the strategy in us utilizing the ARPA funds to get the half house curtain. And then it becomes a more viable option when promoters start realizing that, hey, I can bring an up and coming artist to a big arena. The artist will get the intimate feel that they want, and they can still sell tickets and still have a successful show. Primus was a really great example of that we just recently hosted. They were not set up to sell 6,000 tickets. The hope for them was to get to roughly around 3,500. And that agent saw, wow, the band can make money. I can sell this building. I can kind of cut the room in half. And so he starts to think about all the other artists that kind of fall in that niche. Incubus is another one that he works with. So now I've got his wheels turning of, oh, okay, now I don't have to kind of be fearful of going into such a big room. I can create a different setting. And so that's, to answer that question, that's part of the strategy of, yes, I would love to be giving you guys money back at the end of the year. And I think that's part of like how Jim and I are kind of approaching things. But Jim, don't let me step on your toes. You can certainly chime in if I left something out.
No, absolutely. It's all about creating the greatest diversity possible to maximize event days in the arena. The more events we can get in, the more butts we put in seats, and the money we can generate in revenue to offset the expenses of the arena.
Thank you.
Committee members, any other questions? All right, I have 2 questions. Do you mind if I send them to you at the same time, Melanie? Because they are related to COVID, but I'm curious about each one. So do you mind if I hit you with both of them?
Go for it, man.
All right. So my first question is, I know that part of what had been sent over was the idea about understanding public willingness to enter a mass gathering. My first question is, how do you assess, or how have you been sort of gathering data on what a public sentiment or what a consumer sentiment would be as you move forward? So as you budget for what a consumer would do, because the data is always jumping around. So that's the first part of the question. The second part is vaccine mandates and how you've put that thought into maybe your budget. Are you looking to begin to exclude non-vaccinated and keep vaccinated? Are you going to do mask mandates? How are you going to operate cross insurance? Because I'm seeing other arenas do different things. And I'm just curious if that has impacted, or if that goes into the conversation this budget or future budgets?
Sure. So the first question is, how do I know what the consumer is doing? And that gets wrapped up into my concessions commission line. One of the things that I do is I look at per caps. So what is the consumer spending on average per show? And I won't compare like a family show to a concert. That's two different buyers. But I will historically look back, and that's why I said 1920 was a really great, well-researched budget, because what I did was I've got a spreadsheet, and for each event, I took all of the concessions and all of the numbers, and I went back 3 or 4 years so I could follow that line to see what was the consumer doing. You know, if the numbers went up or went down, why did they go down? You know, ice racing, well, they went down because we had a snowstorm on that one. So, okay, that's an outlier. And so I will track the per cap, what their average spending is, and then I'll start knowing kind of what they're doing. So Brothers Osborne was is a really great example. That was our first concert back after being shut down for 18 months. The building record for most money spent in a per cap. So the average per cap was at $16. We did $22 that night. And so I thought, okay, people are blowing off steam. That's what's happening. They want to get out of the house so bad. And so I kind of thought, well, the budget's going to look awesome this year. I hope that trend continues. And so all of the shows have not, blown the record out of the water, but I am seeing an uptick in what people are willing to spend. Like I said, if they're buying the ticket, they're coming. They're definitely coming, and they're definitely willing to spend. It's kind of like they're blowing off steam. And so that's how we track what the consumer is spending. So I think this year, particularly as we go along with vaccines or any mandates that get rolled out, I think that those numbers in general will be very interesting to kind of add into my historical data to see, well, what is the consumer spending? What's the family, as far as family shows go? When the mom and dad bring their kids out to Disney on Ice, are they spending differently? And so that's the number that I look at as far as like what the consumer is doing. And then as far as, and I think the second question was vaccine mandates. Am I taking that into consideration with the budget? There are two parts of that. When we were going into this budget, we definitely knew that there was going to be a lot more spending as far as cleaning went. So that we definitely took into consideration. I mean, if you think hand sanitizer, just the amount of chemicals we knew we were going to go through, that certainly was taken into consideration. But as far as the vaccine mandate, and I might need to get you to repeat the question. Was the question, ask me that question again and try to write it down.
No, I appreciate it. What I'm sort of getting at is I know some arenas are only allowing vaccinated individuals. Some may do mask mandates so that non-vaccinated and vaccinated, and I've seen some arenas have split and sort of put two sides of that. I'm just curious as to what this budget reflects your understanding of, okay, where you may go from here. I know that you sort of got cut halfway through. Vaccines are very brand new, but I'm just curious your vision of, okay, what is the Cross Insurance Arena going to do?
So my favorite answer to this is everything I say at this moment is written in sand at low tide. So when we were putting this budget together, vaccines were just getting rolled out. And at that point, there had been no mandates as far as local ordinances go that included vaccines or what any of that looked like. Those mandates are always going to come from the venue owner or local ordinances. And so that's when I kind of looked to Jim and said, okay, it's going to come from him because he is, kind of unique that he is the same, riding the two horses with the one butt is the example that I gave there. And so when we were putting this budget together, vaccines, how they were going to impact us certainly wasn't taken into consideration. But I think that figuring out how vaccine mandates are coming into play is probably going to show up in the consumer spending number as far as the per cap goes. And so as Jim in the county kind of rolled everything out last week, I kind of knew the first thing that was going to come into play is how many refunds was I going to be issuing in the next couple of weeks before Maine Mariners hockey. took place. And so there shockingly has not been a ton of that. And I think the team has actually gotten thank you emails from elderly individuals that said, hey, I can now bring my wife. Like, I feel safe and comfortable to come to the games. And so I think that the answer to the vaccine and the mandate, I think that it's going to show up in the numbers, and then it's also going to show up on social media. You know, we can certainly see when people are very unpleased and the number of phone calls that we get. So I know Jim has been yielding those initially, but I think and Jim, you could speak to this. I think you get so many different scenarios when people say, hey, I bought tickets to this show. We had COVID, but the doctor's saying I'm going to test positive for the next 30 or 45 days, but can I still come because I don't have it? You know, so those unique scenarios are kind of coming into play and what we're now having to navigate, but it's not so much people saying, no, I'm just not coming. But, you know, so that one's kind of a hard one to track, other than the refunds, how many we're having to issue. So I've kind of been looking at that, but thankfully, knock on wood and, you know, fingers crossed, we haven't seen a ton of those at this point.
Right. Yeah, Jim, did you want to, I noticed you're unmuted. So did you want to jump in with anything?
The only thing I would add is that I think we took the stance that you needed to have the vaccine, but we gave the opening that someone could get a negative test within 72 hours. So we're opening up a wider field there. And we're also strongly suggesting masks be worn. So, you know, it is one of those things that you don't have to wear masks, but we're strongly suggesting you wear a mask. So, you know, we've kind of walked that fine line, because before we made that announcement, we were getting people coming at us in this direction and not then on the other side. So it was, we were kind of going down a road to create a policy for the arena, knowing that we weren't going to make everyone happy. And I think we kind of touched upon it enough. And I think we're going to create the safest possible environment at today's current time. And we will continue to monitor how our environment in our region is doing relative to numbers. You know, I think, you know, as Melanie was talking, we created this budget and we were just getting vaccinations rolling when that was happening. So it was really creating a budget blind. And when Brother Osborne came in July, I think if we can all remember back in late June, July, and August, we thought we were all out of the woods. We were all no masks anywhere. We were all just going back to normalcy. And then end of August came and the Delta variant ripped through our region. So, and here we are. So, you know, we're hoping that as some of the communities or states that had the Delta variant early, they've started subsiding in numbers. We're hoping that we're just lagging behind them, because we lag behind them on the cases. So we're hoping as the season moves on, especially in hockey, we'll be able to relax some of these restrictions, but we'll be very conservative too and cautious while doing it. We want to make sure that our region's ready for it.
Oh, well said. No, I appreciate that. All right, committee members, any other questions for Melanie? All right. Melanie, thank you so much for being with us, for sharing all this information. This has been great. It's given us more context. I know Jim's taking great notes, and we'll pester him for a few more things that I think we'll want moving forward. But thank you for just presenting and providing us this information. So
Absolutely.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for your time. And Jim, if you need anything, you certainly know where to find me. Alex,
we'll be
too.
talking tomorrow.
I figured. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Melanie.
Yep, bye.
All right, committee members. I don't see anything else. I don't think there's anything else. You're probably feeling about as tired as I am. So here's really the next thing is to sort of schedule our next meeting to think about what we do with all of this. I'll before I jump too far ahead, Jim, Alex, do you want to comment on anything that was said or thoughts that you've had? I know we've taken in a lot of information, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to comment if there's anything you wanted to add at this time.
No, I think I will digest what we've heard over the last 2 hours. Nothing's new from what I heard. I'd be surprised if one of the department heads came in with something new that I didn't know about. But I think, tonight's dialogue leads up to a good conversation at our next meeting. And we'll be a little bit more open after we all think about it a little more.
Absolutely. All right. That's what I was thinking as well. So community members, I'm wondering if we want to take and do our next meeting 2 weeks out. I have a conflict on the 27th anyways, but I know our end date is the 15th. And so I am cognizant that if we come to the table and we have more things we need to discuss and it takes much longer, should we leave open one more date to come together? I'm open for suggestions. I'm open to hear thoughts from committee members. What is your assessment or what are you feeling? Paul, we'll start with you.
I'm out of the country November 1st to the November 11th.
Wow. Okay. Jocelyn, go ahead.
Thank you, Dustin. I'm jealous, Paul. I can hope you have good travels. Maybe we do, since you have a conflict on the 27th, perhaps we do the 28th or the 29th instead to accommodate for Paul being out of the country. I don't know if that works for folks.
Paul, I'll start with you. Would a 28th or 29th work?
28th and 29th. Yeah, I can juggle things around and make those dates.
Okay. Lee, how would either of those work? Is there one that you prefer?
Excuse me, the 28th works, the 29th does not, so I can do the 28th.
Okay. And Jocelyn, you as well. Which is the 28th good?
Yeah, I mean, nobody wants to meet on a Friday anyway, so.
I wasn't going to say it, but I'm going to say it. Yeah. No, I feel bad that I don't have that Bob's not here to sort of weigh in. I'm sure we can reach out to him and maybe alert him. I would concur. The 28th would be really good for me. I could also make that, and then we can sort of assess from there. It sounds like then, Paul, let's try to do as much work, if not all of it, on that date, and maybe we can move things forward and be done, wrap up with our work. So. All right, so then let me entertain a motion then for our next meeting to be October 28th. I'm assuming same time, 5:30 p.m., or would we need a different time? 5:30 works.
Yeah, I'll make that motion. So
Same
moved.
time is fine with me.
Okay, Jocelyn made move the motion for October 28th at 5:30 for our next meeting. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Lee is seconded. Any other discussion, conversation? All right, seeing no discussion, we'll take a vote. We'll do roll call vote. We'll start with you, Lee.
Yes.
Jocelyn?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
I'm a yes as well. Motion carries 4-0, one abstention or one not here. We will contact Bob. I hope he'll be able to make that. I hope that isn't going to be an encumbrance. But so Jim, Alex, if you're okay with it, we're going to meet October 28th, 5:30. And we'll do a lot of the work right there. My assessment, especially after hearing everything, is sort of just go through each of those budgets, and if there are final recommendations, we'll just talk about it right then and say this is what we're thinking. My other assessment or my other assumption is we'll make motions at each moment so that we all collectively are sort of putting that on the books. But at any rate, that sounds like what we're going to do. Any other things, committee members? Jim, Alex, anything before we adjourn?
No, all set here. Thank you for your time. I know we went a little late tonight, but appreciate you staying attentive and listening to the different departments.
My apologies for the distraction. I'll shoot you all an email afterwards, letting you know what was up.
Okay.
Yeah, hope everything's
See you
okay.
soon.
Yeah, I'm hoping everything's all right. So, do we usually do you want to do a motion to adjourn? I can't remember if we did it last week, but let's, because it's fun. I love it. Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Jocelyn's move. Do I get a second?
Second.
Lee is seconded. No discussion, I'm assuming. So can we take a roll call vote? Paul?
Yes.
Lee?
Yes.
Jocelyn?
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Motion carries 4-0, one abstention. We are out of here. So take care, everybody. Get some rest. We'll see you back on the 28th.
Great
Thank you
job,
all.
Dustin. Thank you.